There are moments in life when you make a decision and only later wonder why it felt so strangely familiar. You might choose a partner who mirrors an old pattern, react with anger that seems disproportionate, or crave approval from someone who reminds you of your parents. These are not random impulses, nor are they signs of weakness. They are the echoes of something much deeper, the whispers of the unconscious mind that Sigmund Freud spent his life trying to understand. You may think Freud's ideas belong to old psychology books, but in truth, his presence lives quietly within every decision you make, every emotion you suppress, and every relationship you repeat. Today, we will explore how Freud is still alive in your daily life, shaping your choices even when you believe you're acting freely, and more importantly, how understanding this can transform the way you live, love, and decide. Before we go deeper, I want to invite you to stay with me until the end of this journey. If you're drawn to understanding the human soul, if you've ever looked at your own emotions and wondered where they come from, subscribe to this channel. Not because you have to, but because this is a space where we explore the depths of the mind together, without judgment, without masks. A space for those who seek to know themselves. Freud believed that we are not masters of our own houses. Beneath the rational surface of the mind, there is a vast territory, the unconscious, that silently governs much of what we think, feel, and do. You wake up each morning believing you're in control of your choices, but in truth, invisible threads pull from below, weaving your reality through forgotten memories, repressed desires, and childhood conflicts that never truly disappeared. Freud didn't invent the unconscious. He simply gave it a name and taught us to listen to it. That perhaps is the most radical and human invitation ever made, to listen not only to what we say, but also to what we silence. Think about how you start your day, the way you choose your clothes, how you respond to a message, how you interpret someone's silence. Every one of these moments is loaded with meaning. Freud would say that nothing is accidental. Even a small hesitation, a slip of the tongue, or forgetting an appointment can reveal the drama that plays out within you. The unconscious never sleeps. It just disguises itself in the ordinary details of life. When you say, "I didn't mean to say that," Freud would smile gently and whisper, "But you did." Now imagine that behind every rational decision, there is a hidden motive, an emotional residue from your past. When you pursue success obsessively, maybe it's not ambition, it's the longing for the parental approval you never felt you earned. When you avoid confrontation, perhaps it's the echo of a childhood where peace meant survival. When you sabotage your own happiness, it might be a subtle punishment from a part of you that believes you don't deserve it. Freud's insight wasn't that people are broken, it was that people are layered, and that those layers, when brought to light, can set us free. What does this mean for your daily life? It means that to transform your decisions, you must first dare to look beneath them. The question is not, "What do I want?" but "Who inside me wants this?" The unconscious speaks through desire, but desire is not simple. It's a map of your history, your wounds, your fantasies. Freud saw love not as a pure emotion, but as a repetition, a reenactment of the first love stories we lived as children. The tenderness, the rejection, the longing, the pain, all of it becomes the lens through which we see every relationship that follows. You think you fall in love with someone new, but in truth, you are often trying to resolve something ancient. Have you ever noticed how some relationships feel like déjà vu? As if you've been there before, even though it's a new person, a new place, a new story. That's the unconscious repeating itself, hoping this time perhaps the ending will be different. This repetition compulsion, as Freud called it, is one of the most mysterious forces in our lives. It's the reason people end up in familiar emotional loops, drawn to situations that reflect their deepest, unresolved feelings. Until we recognize the pattern, we remain its prisoners. Freud's gift was not only to reveal this mechanism, but to offer a path out of it. He believed that through awareness, through bringing the unconscious to consciousness, we could gain freedom. Not absolute freedom, for we are never entirely free from our histories, but enough to make different choices. Enough to decide not out of fear, but understanding. Before we continue, I'd love to know something from you. Have you ever felt like you keep making the same mistakes, even when you try to change? Tell me in the comments how that feels for you. You can write, "I see now that some choices aren't just mine. They belong to my past." Sharing your truth might help someone else recognize theirs. Freud once said that the voice of the unconscious is quiet but persistent, and that ignoring it only makes it speak louder through symptoms. You might think of symptoms as illnesses or disorders, but Freud saw them differently. To him, a symptom is the soul's compromise. It's how the unconscious finds a way to express what consciousness tries to silence. Every anxiety, every compulsion, every inexplicable sadness is a message coded in the language of the unconscious. And the moment you begin to listen, your life starts to transform. Imagine you wake up one morning feeling restless, uncertain why. You drink your coffee faster than usual, scroll through your phone aimlessly, and everything feels slightly off. Rationally, you tell yourself it's nothing, maybe you're tired, maybe it's stress. But Freud would ask you to pause. He'd ask, what is your soul trying to say? Because behind every vague discomfort, there's often a truth that was once too painful to face. Maybe you're suppressing anger towards someone you love. Maybe a part of you feels unseen, ignored, unheard. The body becomes the stage where the unconscious performs what the mind denies. Repression, in Freud's view, is not a failure of willpower, it's a defense. It's the mind's way of protecting you from what it thinks you can't handle. But repression doesn't erase, it only hides. And what's hidden seeks return. That's why you might find yourself reacting intensely to small things, why certain words trigger unexpected emotions, why you sometimes overreact and can't explain why. These aren't random explosions, they are eruptions of what was repressed. The unconscious doesn't forget. It waits. It remembers in feelings, in gestures, in dreams. Now think about your decisions, what to study, where to live, whom to love. You might believe these are conscious choices, but Freud would tell you that they are woven with threads of your early experiences. The child within you never vanishes. It only changes form. That child's longings, fears, and unresolved conflicts whisper into your adult life. When you choose a demanding boss, it might be the echo of a strict father. When you chase affection from someone emotionally unavailable, it could be the echo of a parent's distance. You're not repeating because you enjoy the pain. You're repeating because deep down, you're trying to rewrite the ending. This is the beauty and tragedy of the human psyche. We long to heal through repetition. Freud called this the compulsion to repeat, but also saw within it a hidden hope. Every repetition carries the silent wish that maybe this time things will end differently, that love will be returned, that the wound will finally close. And when we finally bring that unconscious longing to the surface, we stop repeating blindly. We start choosing consciously. But how does this understanding actually transform daily life? It begins with self-observation. Not judgmental, but curious. When you feel irritation towards someone, instead of reacting, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? When you're drawn to someone, ask, what part of me is seeking them? Awareness is not analysis for the sake of control. It's compassion for the parts of you that are still living in yesterday. Freud's method wasn't just about uncovering darkness, it was about transforming pain into meaning. Imagine you're standing in front of a mirror. You see your reflection, but behind it, there's another image faintly visible, a younger version of you looking back. That's your unconscious self, the one still holding emotions you once had to hide. To truly see yourself, you must also see them. That's where real freedom begins. You don't erase the past, you integrate it. You give voice to what was silenced. Freud's ideas also invite us to be more empathetic toward others. When someone acts defensively, it's not always hostility, it's protection. When someone avoids intimacy, it might not be indifference, it could be fear of loss. Understanding the unconscious allows us to see that everyone is fighting invisible battles. And when you start to view human behavior through that lens, compassion naturally grows. You stop demanding perfection from others and from yourself. Think about your everyday conflicts, arguments with loved ones, misunderstandings at work, moments of jealousy or guilt. Freud would tell you that each of these is a dialogue between different parts of your psyche. The ego, trying to maintain balance. The superego, judging and demanding. The id, desiring and rebelling. These forces aren't abstract theories, they're alive in every decision you make. When you choose to stay silent instead of speaking your truth, that's the superego's caution. When you act impulsively, that's the ID breaking through. When you weigh the two and find middle ground, that's your ego doing its best to keep peace between the inner worlds. This constant negotiation shapes your reality. The key is not to suppress any of these parts, but to listen to them. Your desires aren't your enemies. Your guilt isn't your punishment. They are messages from within. Freud believed that mental health is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to live with it consciously, to know what moves you, what restrains you, and to act not out of blindness, but understanding. There's something deeply human about realizing that every choice carries the echo of an inner story. You are not broken because you repeat. You are human because you're trying to heal. And that attempt to rewrite the past through the present is the most tender, courageous thing you do, often without realizing it. If you've ever recognized yourself in these hidden repetitions, if you've ever wondered why your emotions seem to follow patterns, tell me in the comments what realization this brings to you. Write, I see my past in my choices, and I want to understand it. Your words might resonate with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in this journey. Freud believed that civilization itself is built upon repression. We give up instinctual desires in exchange for belonging, structure, and order. Every rule, every social expectation, every polite gesture hides a small renunciation of something primal. You learn to control your anger to be accepted, to moderate your desires to be respected, to silence your needs to be loved. This suppression isn't inherently wrong. It's the price of living together, but it leaves a residue. What's unexpressed doesn't vanish. It burrows inward, transforming into anxiety, frustration, or a quiet sense of incompleteness. Freud called this the conflict between the individual and society, and it remains at the heart of modern life. You can feel it every day, the tension between what you want and what you think you should want. You chase success because society tells you it means fulfillment, but deep down you crave peace, freedom, or creativity. You stay in relationships because they look right, even if your soul feels unseen. You smile at work when your inner world is screaming for rest. Freud's insight wasn't that this is wrong. It's that pretending the conflict doesn't exist only deepens it. When you acknowledge your divided self, you stop living under the illusion of control and start living with awareness. Let's look at how this appears in your decisions. When you're at a crossroads between two jobs, two loves, two versions of yourself, there's always more happening than logic can grasp. You might weigh the pros and cons, consult friends, make lists, but the truth of your choice often emerges from a silent emotional space. Freud would say that you're not only deciding in the present, you're deciding with every past version of yourself who still seeks resolution. Maybe the safer choice feels appealing because it echoes the need for parental approval. Maybe the risky one calls to you because it represents the freedom you were once denied. Understanding this doesn't make choosing easier. It makes it honest. In love, Freud saw perhaps the clearest expression of the unconscious. We believe we fall in love with someone new, but in truth we fall into a pattern that feels familiar. The warmth, the chaos, the ache, it all mirrors something we once felt as children. This is why attraction often defies logic, and why love can be both beautiful and painful. You're not just loving another person, you're trying to heal through them. You might seek a partner who recreates the dynamic you had with your caregivers, not because you want to suffer, but because a part of you hopes to finally be loved in the way you always needed. Freud's message here was never cynical, it was profoundly compassionate. He showed that love's mysteries are not madness, they're memory. And when you begin to see that, everything changes. You stop blaming yourself for wanting too much or too little. You start understanding that your emotions are not flaws but messages. You start treating your patterns not as prisons but as maps. Every time you repeat something painful, it's an invitation to remember. Every time you feel resistance, it's your unconscious asking to be heard. Healing, then, is not about perfection. It's about dialogue. It's learning to speak to the parts of yourself you've long ignored. Freud also warned that ignoring pleasure comes at a cost. The pleasure principle, as he called it, is not about indulgence. It's about the natural rhythm of life. You were born to seek satisfaction, connection, play. But society teaches restraint, control, productivity. In the name of discipline, many people forget how to enjoy, how to rest, how to feel, and when pleasure is denied, the psyche rebels. It shows up as burnout, apathy, or even physical tension. Freud's vision of health included the capacity for joy. To allow yourself moments of true pleasure, authentic, guilt-free pleasure, is an act of psychological liberation. In your daily life, this means daring to feel without immediately analyzing. To laugh when joy arises, to cry when sadness floods, to love when your heart opens, even if it scares you. Every emotion you repress becomes a ghost that follows you. Every emotion you accept becomes energy that moves through you. Freud's legacy is not an intellectual exercise. It's a way of living. It's a call to honesty. And yet Freud also knew that awareness alone isn't enough. You can understand your past perfectly and still feel trapped by it. That's because transformation doesn't come from thinking. It comes from feeling what you once avoided. The unconscious doesn't speak the language of reason. It speaks through symbols, through dreams, through sensations. That's why therapy, in Freud's vision, wasn't about advice, but listening. Deep, patient listening. He believed that by speaking freely, by letting thoughts wander, we could uncover the hidden logic of our suffering. The same principle applies to self-awareness. When you stop censoring your inner voice, your truth starts to surface. Imagine walking through a forest at night with a small lantern. The darkness around you is vast, but wherever you point the light, shapes begin to appear. Trees, paths, footprints. The darkness doesn't disappear, it becomes known. That's the journey Freud offered us. You don't need to eliminate your unconscious, you need to illuminate it. Every insight, every realization is like lighting another corner of that forest. You might ask, what does this really change? It changes everything. When you understand that your reactions have roots, you stop seeing yourself as irrational. When you realize your anger hides grief, your fear hides love, and your guilt hides desire, you become kinder to yourself. And that kindness ripples outward, to your relationships, your work, your choices. You stop seeking perfection and start seeking authenticity. Freud's vision of the self wasn't of control, but integration. To live as a whole being, aware of the light and the shadow alike. Perhaps the most transformative idea Freud left us is that nothing in you is meaningless. Every dream, every hesitation, every desire carries a story. When you begin to listen, life itself becomes richer. You start noticing how your daily routines reflect unconscious rituals, how the way you arrange your home, the tone you use when you speak, the foods you crave, all echo emotional histories. Even silence, even avoidance, speaks. Freud didn't tell us to judge these details, he told us to be curious about them. So as you go through your day tomorrow, observe yourself gently. Notice when you feel drawn to something or someone. Notice when you feel resistance. Ask, Not what's wrong with me, but what part of me is speaking. That single question can transform your decisions because it shifts your focus from control to understanding. The unconscious isn't an enemy. It's your oldest friend, waiting for recognition. At the end of his life, Freud wrote that where the id was, the ego shall be. That is, where there was chaos, understanding will come. This is not a promise of perfection, but of peace. When you bring awareness to your hidden motives, you stop living on autopilot. You start choosing with consciousness, with tenderness, with truth. You begin to act not as a product of your past, but as a participant in your own becoming. And maybe that's the transformation Freud ultimately offered, not to eliminate your unconscious, but to live in friendship with it, to let it guide you, not as a tyrant, but as a companion reminding you of who you are beneath the masks. When you live like this, your decisions stop being reactions. They become expressions. Life stops being a repetition. It becomes creation. If this reflection touched you, I invite you to subscribe and stay with me. This space is for those who wish to live with more awareness, to look beneath the surface and find meaning where others see only routine. And if something in this journey resonated, if you saw yourself in these words, leave a comment below. Tell me what part of your life you now see differently. You can write, I want to live consciously, not by repetition, because sharing your truth might be the first conscious act of freedom your unconscious has been waiting for. In the end, Freud doesn't simply live in theories or history books. He lives in your everyday choices, in your loves, in your fears, in your silences. He lives each time you dare to look inward instead of outward, each time you pause before judging yourself and ask why. And when you begin to live that question, to truly live it, you discover that the unconscious isn't a dark force to be feared, but a deep river of memory and meaning flowing quietly beneath everything you are. Understanding it doesn't make life easier, but it makes it real. And in that reality, you finally find the freedom to decide, not from your past, but for your future.